Hi and welcome to Andy with the Spanners. Now today we're going to be getting out into the workshop and we've got a fan belt to do. So as you can gather, this isn't for a bike, this is for a car. So you know, we're going to get Andy in the garage and we've got that to do, and then afterwards we've got shocks to do. So this is rear shocks. We're doing these on a Vauxhall Agila, which is actually the same as a Suzuki Spash. It's made by Suzuki. The differences are very, very minor, cosmetic ones. Now, the job that we're going to do in changing these items over is pretty much the same on most cars. So any skills that you pick up along the way from doing this, then they'll come in useful. But before we get started, the most important thing that we need to get started is a brew. So get yourself, is it coffee if yours thing? Who knows? Cup of tea, can't beat a proper cup of tea. So let's get stuck in. Let's get out in the garage. Okay, we'll get cracking on this Vauxhall Agila. Now the Agila, as I mentioned before, is pretty much the same as the Suzuki Splash. So I'll just quickly show you the car down there. It's only a little car sat in the garage here. So basically the first job that we're going to do is to look at swapping out this belt. Now I previously have changed the main alternator belt that feeds that drives the alternator and the water pump and everything else all driven there. The one that I couldn't change because they didn't have them in stock was the one that goes around the air conditioning. So just as a precaution really, we're going to change that. Now one of the problems is where it is, so I'm just going to show you down here with the camera. Now I've got my inspection light down there to help to shine a light down as to where it is. So you can just about see down there where the belt is. Also you can see that the pulley down there has got a centre nut. I'm going to try and get the camera even closer in if I can, and you can just about see the centre nut on the pulley. That locks it in position, and then just to the right of the belt you can see the adjuster nut, and that adjuster nut is what we've got to move in order to slacken the belt off in the first place to get it out, and then once we've got it out to then replace the belt and then retension it. So let's get down in there. First of all, although you can't really see the nut very well, you can just about see the ratchet where we're going to just slacken that off. As you could hear, that's quite tight. Doesn't need to be undone completely, it only needs to be slackened off. I'm going to try 12 on there first and see if a 12 is the jobby. It looks like a 12. Yep, there's a 12 on there. So now we can adjust it, and it's a very difficult job to get your hands in, so if you've got big hands like me, that makes this job much more difficult. Someone with very small hands would find this a lot easier. So this is an example of Andy with the spanners, where actually you really could do with being small-handed with the spanners. Right, I'm switching over to a much smaller ratchet in order to be able to get in there. What was pretty obvious there was that the larger ratchet was too big to get in there. Once you've got it loose enough, as you can see, we are loosening off, and once you've got it loose enough, it will lift off over the pulleys. But And we've got a bit further to go on that. Let's see if I can get my hand right round that way. And slackening off beautifully now. It's surprising how slack it needs to be actually in order to get it off the pulley, because the way this type of belt sits down into the grooves. There we go. So there we have it. There's the belt. And as you can see, it's not in bad condition, but it would probably have quite a few miles left in it, to be honest. But because I've already changed the other belt, so it's a good idea to change them both. It looks like it's quite old. It's hard to judge. It's not actually cracking. Usually what you can do is turn them around inside like that, because what will usually happen is when they get really bad, they start to crack, and then that's then just the precursor to them failing altogether and shredding, and then that leaves you stuck by the roadside. So there's the old and here's the new. We are using a Gates belt. Now, I've always found Gates to be excellent belts. They've always been good. I've never had any troubles with Gates belts, so whenever I've got the chance, that's the ones I fit. I'm not sponsored by Gates or anyone else, but Gates, if you'd like to sponsor the channel, then please do. We always use your belts, they're great. Anyway, let's just go on to refitting. So refitting the belt is the same process as taking it off. We need to loop it around the pulleys and making sure that it sits down nicely in the grooves. Now what you might find is that the new belt is considerably tighter than the old one, which is what we've got here. So I actually need to wind that off some more. Now that gives us an idea basically of how much stretch and wear there has been in that old belt. So, you know, whereas I was saying it doesn't look too bad, that amount of movement we've just had to adjust to get the belt on tells you just how much wear there's been. So I'm just making sure it's sitting nicely in the grooves, and then we can put some tension back on it. Now you can do, this one's doing nicely with your fingers, sometimes it just won't, and you have no choice but to get the ratchet on there. Also make sure that's done up as well. Now we've got a little bit of tension already, and now we can just go ahead with our ratchet, get that ratchet in there. And then periodically check the tension. You want to see a little bit of movement. You don't want it unnecessarily tight. It feels like it's getting some tension now. I've got some movement there on the belt, but there's definitely a bit of tension there, so I'm quite happy with that. So what I'll now do is go back to that. See, this is where it would be really useful if I remember where on earth I'd just put that. There it is. I put down the socket. This is what happens, you see, you get to a certain age and you put things down and you can't remember where you put them. So the final bit then is to tighten that centre bolt back up. There we go. And that stops the whole thing moving. So there you have it. That is one new belt down in there, and that is all there is to it. It's just awkward with the access because it's a small engine sitting in a small engine bay. Not an awful lot of room, but that's that job done. Now, obviously, that has saved you quite a bit of labour time. If you took that to a garage, you'd probably charge you an hour's labour. That saved you a chunk of money if you have a go yourself. So the next job is to go on to doing the back shocks. So the next job here is to do the rear shocks on this little Agila. Now, the reason for doing the back shocks, really, it's all rather bouncy on the back. It's only a small car, but it does seem to want to bounce rather a lot for a little car, and that's not particularly great for road holding and just safety. So just as a precaution, really, just to be sure, we're going to change the shocks over, get some nice new shocks on there which will improve the road holding no end. So that's the next job. So I need to get the car jacked up, take the rear wheels off, and then we can see where we're at. So that'll be the next thing. Right, first thing is to get these trims off, and I have a trim tool for the job, a plastic tool that doesn't damage anything. And this particular car has just got plastic hubcaps. A lot of them will have alloys, and then that just reveals the 4 wheel nuts. So before we can do that, we need to get them jacked up. The jacking points on this vehicle are quite obvious. Some are not so, but this one is really obvious where they are. So we just get it located, and then before we lift the car up, we need to crack these wheel nuts loose. Now I've got my trusty breaker bar out, which is a good length bar. The reason being is a bit more control over it, but also we don't know if someone has windy gunned these on in the past and how tight they are, so much easier to do it like this with a good length bar. Obviously you don't want to do it up with a bar like that, otherwise you'll never get them undone again, or strip a thread or something. But just to make it easy to get them undone, good length breaker bar. Now they're that far off, we can carry on and jack the car up. Okay, that's jacked up high enough. Right, so we've got the thing jacked up. I've also got a stand underneath it so that we can then spin these off and take the wheel off. Sound a little bit dry, so we're going to need to check everything when we put it all back together. Tiny bit of copper grease never goes amiss, and that should give us all the access we need to be able to get in there. Yeah, that's a very dry sounding wheel nut. Be a good idea to have a tiny smear of grease on there just to. Yeah, and there we go. There's one wheel off. Now, all we need with that is a nice brew, because we've got this far. And here we go. Thank you very much. So, we get a brew on the go, and then we can get cracking. So, with the wheel off now, we can see down inside there you've got the spring and the shock absorber. Now, this whole trailing arm assembly, and there's a beam going across. Very simple suspension, drum brake on the rear. So we just got to take this off. Now, to get to the top of that, we've got to find our way in the boot somewhere. And I'm guessing under that panel is probably going to be where we need to be. And then down at the bottom is fairly straightforward by the look of it. So we need to get the right tool out for this one. Right, so we've got a bit of light on the subject, and I've got my tea, so better drink my tea before it goes cold. That's it, let's put the tea back in there. Now under this cover you can see there's a couple of little recesses front and rear, and I've got one of my favourite little tools, which is an old screwdriver where I've just got a little hook on the end, which means it's perfect for getting in to these sorts of places to be able to just unhook things without gouging it to death. Off it comes. And just inside here is the I'm going to lift the camera off its mount for a second, just so you can get a little bit of a better view. There we go, there's the top of the shock absorber. It's got a flat on the top there for you to get hold of. Then you've got a locking nut, then the main nut, then a washer, then a rubber mount, and that is what basically holds that in. So the first thing you've got to do is crack that loose and then undo the main nut. The whole shaft can just twirl round and round, which is why you've got a flat on the top there, so that you can get some grips on there to hold it. Sometimes they'll have an Allen key hole in the top, a hex hole, for you to get in there. So there's a decent view of it. That's what we've got to do next. So we'll just get some tools sorted and then we'll get cracking. Okay, so it's a case of getting in there with the spanner. First of all, on the top one, and there goes the top one, so we can wind that off. Now it's an unusual size, this, because this is actually a 16mm. Now you generally would expect a 17 is a more common size, so it's a bit unusual. So no substitute for having a good selection of spanners, and of course I would say that with the name of the channel, that what it is, but basically it is there is absolutely no substitute for a good selection. You can never have too many. So what I've always done over the years is to buy spanners when I see a nice set, like for example this Silverline set here with a ratchet end and an open end, and the ratchet end pivots as well. Really useful for getting in awkward odd spaces. They're from Silverline. We're not sponsored by Silverline, I just happen to love the spanner. Works really well. But hey, Silverline, if you want us to if you want to support the channel, we'll be happy to use more of your tools. They are great. So I've now pretty much got that apart. So the next thing is to go down below and to undo the mount off the bottom of the car. So as you can see, the bottom mount there, that's quite corroded. So what we're going to do before we start is just get some penetrating oil around it, and we need to leave that to soak for a bit. I'm using some WD-40 fast release penetrant, but I found that works really great. Again, I'm not supported by WD-40, but interesting fact, WD, water dispersant 40, the 40th attempt at a water dispersant, that's why it's called WD-40. There you go. So what we're going to do is leave that to soak while we go and enjoy a nice brew, and then we'll come back to that in about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll get a socket on there and we'll crack it loose. Right, that's had a few minutes to soak in, so we'll get there. Now before we actually reach under the car, just a quick safety, I've still got the jack under the car, but in addition to that I've got a platform as well to secure the car. So this jacking platform is there to secure it. Please always don't rely just on a jack. Make sure you've got a secure platform or axle stands or some other way to make sure it's absolutely solid. So now we can get that, there it goes, and that penetrating oil has done its job, because that's undoing nice and smoothly. And just in case you guys were wondering whether this is really, you know, when we spoke at the beginning of the video about this being Vauxhall, but actually it's a Suzuki, There you go. It's even got Suzuki on the exhaust can there. It's everywhere you look, it's got Suzuki written on the parts, so it is a Suzuki Splash, even though it's carrying Vauxhall badges. Every part I've had to buy so far, it's got the same cross-reference on it. It's the same for both. It's one of those collaborations, nearly off, one of those collaborations between manufacturers to keep costs down for manufacturing. End result is a great little car. I mean, it is only a little car. You can just see how thin those springs are. Ever so thin. Okay, so that's that off now. So now we just need to manoeuvre that off, and it's just a gentle wriggle off, and there it comes. And now it should pull through from above. So what I'm going to do now is just go up above and give it a gentle tap, and he should drop out. So fitting the new shock in is just the same basically as taking it off, doing everything the other way. You just a case of popping it through the hole and threading those on, and down underneath we've got that onto the bottom there. So all we've got to do is replace the bolts, and then just do that back up again. And that's all there is to it. That's one side done. We just got to repeat it for the other side, and there we are, job done. So all that's left to do now is to pop this wheel back on. Now, I did mention before that the wheel nuts seem rather dry. They are a little. So what I'm going to do before I put this on is just put a tiny trace of copper grease on there, and a little tiny bit around this cup centre. You don't want to put so much on it gets onto the brakes, but a tiny trace just to stop any corrosion in its tracks. And then that's basically it. Well, thanks for watching this edition of Andy with the Spanners. I hope you found it really useful, and I hope you found that a little bit of inspiration to get out in the garage and get the spanners out and tackle a few tasks. Please, if you like the video, please like and subscribe. Subscribing is free. Just click the button down below there somewhere and you can subscribe to the channel, and that way you'll get notified whenever we pop up new videos. It's been an interesting one today, getting through those jobs on the car, and the car's all ready for the road again. It just goes to show that just with a few simple tools that you can tackle some of these jobs yourself. So thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again on the next one.